You've been lied to your entire life, and usually it's because someone wanted to make a quick buck. In fact, the absolute worst lie on this list was faked by a famous movie studio that won an award for literally faking science. But let's start with a lie that is sitting right under your fingertips right now. The QWERTY keyboard. Look at the keyboard on your phone right now. You're actually typing on a 150-year-old trap designed for metal machines and Morse code. Back in the 1870s, the first mechanical typewriters had a massive flaw. If you typed too fast, the heavy metal arms underneath would violently crash and jam. To fix this, the inventor rearranged the keys to separate the clunky mechanical linkages. They also shifted letters around so telegraph operators could quickly translate confusing incoming Morse code. Today, you type on smooth glass. We could easily switch to a much more ergonomic layout that saves your fingers miles of stretching. But because early typing schools forced millions of workers to memorize this exact QWERTY pattern, businesses refused to change. We became permanently locked in. You are literally typing on a 150-year-old ghost. The diamond illusion, that diamond ring sitting in a jewelry window, is actually the result of a massive 100-year-old scam. In reality, diamonds are one of the most common precious gemstones on Earth. In the late 1800s, explorers discovered massive diamond mines in South Africa, and the wealthy businessmen who owned them completely panicked. They realized if everyone had access to them, the price would drop to zero overnight. So, a powerful cartel bought up all the mines and locked millions of diamonds in secret underground vaults to create a completely fake shortage. Then they paid Hollywood studios to feature massive diamonds in romantic movies and invented the famous slogan, "A diamond is forever." They even completely fabricated the ridiculous rule that you must spend 2 months' salary on a ring. We still happily pay a massive premium today, simply because we fell for a shiny corporate trick. The Iron Maiden. It is famous for being a brutal, blood-soaked medieval torture device. Except, there is no evidence anyone in the Middle Ages ever used one. It was actually a highly profitable scam invented hundreds of years later. Greedy museum owners in the late 1700s quickly realized that scary, bloody history stories sold way more tickets to tourists than boring old artifacts. So, they literally patched together random wooden antiquities, carved a creepy human face on the outside, hammered giant rusted metal spikes into the doors, and proudly labeled it as an ancient, barbaric relic. The most famous one in Nuremberg was just a patched-together fraud designed to steal money from gullible travelers. Millions of easily tricked tourists happily paid to see it. It was basically a cheap haunted house prop that accidentally made its way into real history books. The ninja's uniform. If a real historical ninja actually walked around a village wearing a black mask and stealth pajamas, the local guards would have arrested them immediately. Real ninjas were highly trained secret spies, and their entire job was to remain completely unnoticed. They wore perfectly normal, everyday clothes to blend into the crowd as traveling merchants or humble farmers. So where did the black mask come from? It actually originates from old Japanese theater plays. During these shows, the stagehands who moved the heavy props wore all black outfits, forcing the audience to ignore them. These invisible stagehands were called kuroko, and the audience had an unspoken agreement to pretend they didn't exist. But sneaky playwrights thought it would be a brilliant twist to have an invisible stagehand suddenly pull out a sword for a massive jump scare. Pop culture simply forgot the theater trick. The vomitorium. History classes absolutely love telling the gross story that ancient Romans were so incredibly greedy. They built special rooms at their massive banquets just to throw up their decadent food and go right back to eating. It sounds like chaotic Roman history, but it is completely false. While Roman feasts were definitely wild and extravagant, they never actually included dedicated vomit rooms. A vomitorium had absolutely nothing to do with food. It was actually an architectural masterpiece. It was simply the standard Latin name for the massive access corridors in giant amphitheaters. Like the Colosseum, it was brilliantly designed to rapidly funnel tens of thousands of citizens in and out of their seats. But 19th century writers, blinded by rumors of Roman decadence, found the old Latin word, misunderstood it completely. and assumed ancient emperors were just vomiting up grapes for fun. The Salem witch burnings. Everything you know about the infamous Salem Witch Trials is a complete and total lie. Not a single person was ever burned at the stake in Salem. Pop culture got incredibly lazy and mixed up two completely different continents. While European religious courts absolutely did use massive roaring fires to punish heretics, early America was strictly operating under English common law. And under English law, witchcraft wasn't just a standard felony, it was a capital crime. The standard punishment wasn't fire, it was a hanging. All 19 people actually executed in Salem were tragically hanged at an unremarkable spot known as Proctor's Ledge, and one stubborn old man who refused to even stand trial was brutally crushed to death by heavy rocks, an incredibly dark punishment that was actually illegal in Massachusetts at the time. We only picture bonfires today because later writers and Hollywood directors realized a giant European blaze looks way more cinematic on screen than a simple rope. The MSG Panic. For decades, millions panicked that MSG was a dangerous chemical in Asian food. But MSG is just monosodium glutamate, a flavor enhancer, and glutamate also occurs naturally in foods like tomatoes, mushrooms, and Parmesan cheese. The modern panic is often traced to a 1968 letter in a medical journal where one doctor said he felt unwell after eating at a Chinese restaurant and blamed MSG. That helped spread the racist label Chinese restaurant syndrome. Later research found no strong evidence that MSG is harmful for most people at normal dietary levels. Some people may feel short-lived symptoms after large amounts, but that does not prove MSG is broadly toxic. The result was a strange double standard. While diners were warned about MSG in Chinese food, processed foods in the West often kept using it in chips, soups, and packaged snacks. So the real story is not that MSG was poison, it is that fear and bias turned a common flavor enhancer into a long-running food scare. Einstein failed math. We've all heard the comforting story that Albert Einstein, the smartest man who ever lived, actually failed high school math. It makes struggling students feel so much better, but it is entirely fake. Einstein was a literal child prodigy. By the time he was only 15 years old, he had completely mastered high-level complex college calculus and physics. When Einstein saw the fake newspaper article, he laughed and declared, "I never failed in mathematics." So how did the rumor start? When Einstein was studying in Switzerland, he always got the absolute highest grade possible, which was a 1. But halfway through his education, the school administration completely flipped its grading scale. Suddenly, a 6 became the best grade, and a 1 became the absolute worst. A lazy reporter looked at his old inverted report card, got completely confused by the flipped numbers, and happily published a fake underdog story. The alpha wolf. Macho internet culture loves talking about the aggressive alpha wolf that violently bullies the pack into submission. But in the wild, there is no such thing. Wolf packs are simply family units. The so-called alphas are just the mom and dad, and the rest are their own pups. The myth started with a 1947 study by Rudolf Schenkel, who observed captive, unrelated wolves confined in a zoo enclosure. Trapped with strangers in an unnatural setting, they showed aggression and dominance behaviors, and Schenkel published his alpha theory based entirely on that artificial environment. Schenkel's theory was later popularized by biologist David Meech through his best-selling 1970 book. But after studying wild wolves for decades, Meech concluded the alpha concept was wrong and even requested his own publisher stop selling the book. Pop culture ignored him completely. So the real story is not that wolves have brutal alpha leaders. It is that one zoo study got wildly misapplied, and the internet refused to let the science catch up. The Lemming suicide. One of the most persistent nature myths is the horrifying idea that tiny Arctic lemmings blindly follow each other off cliffs to their death. It is largely fabricated and dramatically amplified by Hollywood. In 1958, Disney filmed a nature documentary called White Wilderness in landlocked Alberta, Canada, where lemmings don't even naturally live. The crew bought lemmings from locals, staged a fake migration on a snow-covered set, then physically herded the terrified animals off a cliff into the Bow River below. Disney's films cemented the myth permanently in the public imagination and won an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature, built largely on staged footage. So the real story is not that lemmings are suicidal. It is that a Hollywood crew faked the whole thing, won an Oscar for it, and accidentally created one of the most believed nature myths of the 20th century. History is always a little weirder and a lot more fascinating than what we were taught in school. If you learned something new today, drop a like on the video. And if you want to uncover more crazy historical truths, click the video on your screen right now, hit subscribe, and I'll see you over there.